Hello, you're very welcome back to another episode of Why the Long Face, a podcast with me, Horse O'Keefe. Obviously, I haven't done an episode in the last couple of weeks. Some of my more avid listeners have probably noticed. Most people probably didn't, and that's alright too. I've just been very busy. I've been fairly stressed. There's been a lot going on. But to be fair, the time away, the time off, or the time me being stressed or whatever has given me a lot of time to think about a lot of stuff. So in particular today, I want to talk about forgiveness and the idea of forgiveness. I think some people think that if you forgive someone or you forgive something, that's you excusing it. I think they're two very different things. So that's pretty much what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to give you a couple of examples, like I always do, about my own life, and then just maybe give out a bit of advice on how to kind of start the forgiveness process. So, I mean, the first kind of big foray that I had into forgiveness, like obviously when you're younger, like you're told, like, oh, you had a fight with your sister, oh, you have to forgive her. I'm not talking about instances like that. I'm talking about kind of more substantial things in life. Like, so for example, I was quite badly bullied from the ages of 12 to about 15, 16, and obviously that's something that was kind of discussed a lot with counsellors when I first started my therapy and stuff like that. And the very first counsellor I ever had asked me, had I forgiven the bullies? And I said no. Like, why would I? Like, they made my life literally hell for like 3-4 years of my life. And to be honest, still at that point I was kind of at the stage where I was like, well, it wasn't anything that they did necessarily. It was my fault for being weird. I'm putting weird in quotation marks, or like for being different. And throughout those kind of couple of sessions with that first counsellor, I realised that, like, I was basically excusing what they were doing. Like, I knew these lads. I knew that they basically had a lot of other stuff going on at home. I've always been kind of very aware of if someone is reacting badly in a situation, 9 times out of 10, it's not because of you. It's because of other shit they have going on. And it's just, I mean, it's a very bad way of doing things, but unfortunately, it's the human way. It's what people do. They react badly because they're stressed or because they're angry, because they have other stuff going on, and some poor misfortune normally ends up getting the brunt of it. So I had basically done that all those years. Like, when I first went to counselling, I was 18. So it was a good 2 or 3 years after the bullies and after the bullying and all that, and I hadn't seen them. But it took me a long time to kind of get what the counsellor was saying. Like, I'm not forgiving them for their sake. You don't have to tell the people that you've forgiven them. It's not about that. It's not that you have to go and make this grand gesture and say, I forgive you. It's nothing to do with that. It's for yourself. It's your way of getting closure in the situation. It's your way of accepting that was that. You know, so I basically had to learn and accept that it was nothing I did. No, it was all up to them. But I can still forgive them because they were young, you know, they weren't necessarily 100% aware of what it was doing to me. They were just showing off. And it was hard. It was really, really hard to do. I really didn't kind of want to, but I eventually brought myself around to the idea of why I was doing it. And it wasn't for me then. It wasn't for 18-year-old Owen that was sat inside in this counsellor's office. It was for 12 and 13-year-old Owen. You know, it was like I was going back and talking to that younger version of me and saying that it's okay to be you. Basically, I don't like sport. I'm not a sporty person. I'm a talky video movie photography person, and I always have been. But because I was in a small country primary school where you played soccer every break time and that was it, you know, and I just wasn't any good at soccer, and then it just kind of that followed me into secondary school, unfortunately. But I forgave them. And like I said, it's a tough thing to do, but you have to do it. You have to do it for yourself now, and you have to do it for the version of you that you were at the time, whatever the situation is, whether it was bullying, whether it was a bad relationship, whether it was, I don't know, a fight with a friend, or you have a bad boss. Because I was lucky in a weird way that I started my counselling when I was 18, because I've had to do all the situations I've just mentioned. I've dealt with those in my last couple of years of living. That made it sound like I'm dying. I'm not dying. Just, I meant like since the bullying thing and since the first counselling thing, I've gone through other life situations, and this ability to forgive has definitely helped me. Now, again, 9 times out of 10 I forget about it, and I don't do it until it's too late for my own mental sake. But I eventually remember, and it definitely helps kind of relieve a lot of the anxiety that you would have, or the stress you would have about the situation. Because like sometimes like you can be 5, 6, 10 years on from a situation and it's still playing on your mind, and you just have to try and take time to give it that time to work your way through it. Because sometimes you're not fortunate enough that the person or the issue can be resolved. You know, you mightn't have the opportunity to sit down with the other person that was involved in the situation, if that's your example, if that's what you're going through. Like if it happens to be something between you and someone else, sometimes you mightn't have that option to sit down with that other person for whatever reason. So you'd basically have to do the mediation yourself, and you have to forgive them regardless of if they're there or not, regardless of if they know about it or not. And they don't need to know about it. Like I haven't reached out and told my bullies that I forgive them. You know, I haven't reached out and told any, like my exes, that I forgive them. I haven't reached out and told my old bosses that I forgive them. You know, it's not about that. It's for me. It's you're kind of being, I hate the word selfish because selfish has such kind of negative connotations to it. But I think selfish is probably the best word. But you're doing it for yourself. You're not doing it for anyone else. You don't even have to tell anyone else. You just have to know for yourself that you're doing it for you. Now, saying that, this is something that I've never really talked about with a lot of people. But I feel like in the essence of what this podcast is about in general, and specifically this episode, I owe it to myself and I owe it to ye to be honest. There's one person in particular that I've had dealings with, and to this day I haven't fully forgiven them. Like I still struggle to forgive them. And look, if you know who this person is, I don't necessarily want you to hold it against them. Like it's nothing to do with them specifically. It is very much a me thing, but I just have to get it out there because it's eating me up inside, to be honest. I have to just get it out and let you all kind of know. So in 2018 I had started kind of doing a few auditions for TV shows and short films and that kind of a thing. And I got an email offer for an audition for the lead role in a BBC drama. It wasn't titled yet, but the character's name was Connell. And so I read it. So I was given like this script, this like 2 or 3 page script that I had to learn off and perform to camera and then send back the file. So I spent a good 3 or 4 days like going over that script, because like I didn't have any context about the character or anything like that. I like analysed the script. I tried to kind of figure out what this character's backstory was and all of this, and I poured my heart and soul into that performance, and I sent it off. And maybe 3 or 4 days later I got an email back saying that I'd been accepted for the next round of auditions. And you know what, that was pretty amazing. Like it was a great confidence boost. I'm sorry lads, I'm trying not to cry. It was a great confidence boost, and I was delighted with myself, and I still had to kind of keep it a secret because obviously you when you're doing things like this, you have to keep it a secret because obviously some plot points might have been in the script, and that's like spoilers, and you can't really be telling people. It's a whole kind of confidentiality thing. But so I got the second script for the next audition, And I did the same thing. I spent a good 3 or 4 days just like analysing the script and put my heart and soul into that performance. And I sent it off, and a day went by, and another day went by, and another day went by, and then the days turned into weeks, and the weeks turned into months, and eventually I kind of just stopped checking my emails. I stopped thinking about it. It just kind of got put to the back of my mind. So if we fast forward then to the first lockdown, the TV show Normal People came out, and everyone was talking about it, and there was clips of it everywhere. And I happened to see a clip on TikTok where someone was talking to the lead character, and they mentioned his name, and his name was Connell. So that just kind of set off triggers, it set off alarm bells, it set off everything. So I went flying back through my emails. I found the email, the original email. So obviously I didn't get the role, and Paul Mescal did. And I hate him for that, because he took my life. He's living my life now. That could have been me. And I know this whole episode is on forgiveness, and I know that I should forgive him, but lads, I'm struggling. It's nearly 3 years on now, and I can't, because I see him everywhere. He's all over Facebook. Oh, he was at Coachella. Oh, he's engaged to Phoebe Bridgers. Oh, he has a mustache. Oh, isn't he fucking brilliant? He took my life. I haven't even watched the TV show. Like, I've seen clips, and the way he just acts, like the way he chose to do the scenes, it's not the way I would have done them. Like, I can't, it's too much. I can't watch it, and I'm sure it's probably great, and I'm sure he's a lovely person, but I just can't. I can't help but not like him, because he took what should have been mine. So, in case you hadn't picked up on that at any point, that was it wasn't a total joke. I did audition for Normal People. I obviously didn't get it. And I have this ongoing joke that I don't like Paul Mescal. That's not the point. I just thought it was a funny story to put into the whole podcast on forgiveness and stuff. I'm sorry if you genuinely thought it was real. I was just messing. And look, if Paul Mescal, if you're listening, for whatever reason you might be listening, I don't hate you. I have actually forgiven you for taking my life. And I hope you're very happy with Phoebe Bridgers, and that you go on to have a wonderful long career in the arts. That sounded so disingenuous. So, all jokes aside, there is kind of one person that I genuinely it has taken me a long time to kind of forgive. And it's probably, to be honest, it's probably the person that most people struggle to forgive, or tend to even forget that, like, they forget that they need a bit of forgiveness, and it's yourself or myself. That sounds confusing. You all need to forgive yourselves. You all don't need to forgive me. That's not what I was getting at. I was trying to build it up to be a thing, and I just made it confusing. You need to try and forgive yourselves, lads, because we are our own worst critics. We're harsher on ourselves than we are on anyone else. And, like, I'm not just on about small things. You know, like, I'm not specifically on about, like, your side of an argument and you forgive yourself for overreacting or anything like that. I'm on about when you're suffering with your mental health, and you're beating yourself up, and you're giving out yourself, and you're telling yourself that you're not good enough, and you're telling yourself that you don't need to be this way, and you shouldn't be this way, and it's stupid that you feel down, and that you have no right to feel down, and people have it worse than you, and you go on this really self-destructive kind of line of thought. And I'm not saying you have to forgive yourself straight away, because obviously that's how mental health things work. You have your ups and you have your downs. Like, you go through these phases of being really self-destructive and being really, really hard on yourself. And that's fine, because that's what depression is. I'm not telling you to not do that. You have to have the lows as well as having the highs. But when you are starting to feel a bit better, or you at least are past like that really, really harsh stage, you have to learn and you have to practice self-forgiveness. Because number one, it's not your fault. It's not your fault if you're suffering with your mental health. Now, it's not for every mental health thing, but majority of mental health things are just down to a chemical imbalance in the brain. That's just a physical thing. You cannot control that. Or some mental health things are hereditary. And some things are just caused by life, like anxiety and stuff. That's just something that happens. It's like a learned behavior. It's nothing you can control. If you have them, you have them, and that's it. It's like, it'd be the same as getting annoyed at yourself for having a cold, or being annoyed at yourself because you get a stomach bug, or because you get a sore throat. Like, those aren't things you can control. It's just things that happen. You know, and it is, again, it's very hard. Like most things I say, it's a lot easier said than done. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of practice. And it's taken me a long, long time to get to the point where I can forgive myself. And again, I know, like, I do this podcast and I talk about mental health a lot and stuff, but I still forget. It's generally 2 or 3 weeks on from like the bad time when I even remember to kind of have this self-dialogue or this self-chat and work out this self-forgiveness. So, before I get into any bit of advice or any kind of anything too deep, or anything deeper even, I'm going to do my movie of the week, and it is somewhat connected to what I'm talking about. So the movie is called Burnt. It stars Bradley Cooper, and he plays a chef who at one point like had it all, like had a really good restaurant, was a head chef, but he had his own demons. He had his own problems with kind of drugs and alcohol and mental health stuff, and he just walked away from it. He walked away from the whole lot, and he basically went away, and he decided that his own penance was that he would shuck 1 million oysters. So once he had done that, then he came back, and it's about his journey. Well, one, it's about his journey of self-forgiveness, and then two, it's about him going to the people that he wronged and asking them for forgiveness as well. I have like this strange fascination with movies about chefs in particular. I wanted to be a chef at one point, then realised that it wasn't for me at all. But I love, especially like in movies, so like Burnt, or the movie Chef, if you've never seen that. That's also an amazing film. But it's like the cinematography of just the stuff in the kitchen, apart from the plot of the movie, it's just really beautifully shot, and you've got all these really vibrant colours, and you can kind of shoot them in such interesting kind of sequences and stuff. So even that alone, I suppose, from the point of a cinema head, I really enjoy that. But just for the plot and like the cast, like it's got an amazing cast. Like there's Bradley Cooper, there's I can't remember names now, Nanny McPhee, there's Baron Zemo from the Marvel stuff, Daniel Brühl is his name, Emma Thompson, there we go, not Nanny McPhee, Emma Thompson. Jesus Christ, I'm supposed to be the cinema head and I can't remember names. And like you get to see all these different aspects. You get to see him like coming back, you get to see him trying to get his life back on track, you get to see him going to therapy. And honestly, it's just an amazing film. I use, for any other kind of cinema heads out there, there's a great app called Letterboxd. I'm not sponsored or anything like that. I just use it for keeping track of the movies I've watched. You can add watch lists and you can do reviews. So I review every movie now that I watch, and you review them out of like 5 stars. Now, I've never ever given a 5 star because I've yet to see a film that I think is 100% perfect. But I've given a couple 4.5, and Burnt was one of them. Burnt got 4.5 stars. So if you can find Burnt anywhere, lads, definitely give it a watch. It's a great movie, regardless of if you're in this space of trying to figure out forgiveness and stuff. It's great to watch it for that. If you don't have anything to forgive or anything like that, that's perfectly fine too. It's a beautifully shot very well acted, very well written film. So either way, just watch it. Just do what you're told and just watch it, okay? So I suppose I'll go through what I would consider to be the kind of steps of forgiveness. I think for this context, I'm going to talk about forgiving yourself, because I think that's something that people need to focus on more. And if you can learn to forgive yourself, you can then learn to forgive others for whatever. And remember, again, it's not about forgiving them for their sake. And just because you forgive them doesn't mean that you condone what they did or that you accept what they did. But you're forgiving them for the pain that they caused you. And again, I know it kind of sounds a bit backwards, but I promise you, in the long run, it's a lot more helpful. Because like I said, you don't have to say this to the person. You don't have to like tell the person themselves you've forgiven them. It's not about that. You're not doing it for them. You're doing it for you. You're doing it for your own peace. Because look at lads, life, I've said it before, life is a ball of shit, and there's enough reasons to be down and enough reasons to be stressed. You don't need something from a couple of years ago or a couple of weeks ago or a couple of months ago still just niggling away at the back of your head. So keep that in mind first before you even start on this process. You're forgiving yourself, or you're forgiving them for your sake, not for anyone else's sake. The example I'm going to use, I'm not going to be very specific, but it's something that happened maybe 3 or 4 months ago. I'd been very down, I'd been very stressed. There happened to be a particular situation that I reacted very badly in, and I lost my temper. The very first thing I did, and I know I say it all the time, you get an old piece of pen, you get a piece of pen and a paper. No, fuck's sake, you get a piece of paper and a pen even, and this is what happens. I try to be serious and then I fuck up. Okay, right, ignore all that. You get a pen and a piece of paper and you just write it all down, like the whole thing, the good, the bad, the ugly, the whole lot. Just write it all out. Just get it all out of your head, because then you can read through it and you can find the points that you need to forgive yourself for, or forgive the other person for. So especially in relation to forgiving yourself, you need to focus on and remember, you might have done a bad thing, or your brain might be telling you bad things about yourself, but that does not make you a bad person. They're two very separate things. One is very situational and like in the moment, in the time when you're suffering with your mental health, and one is like who you are as a person. And you have to be able to separate them, because your mental health does not define you. Just because you have bad days or bad weeks or bad months, that's not who you are as a person. Yes, I struggle with my mental health. Yes, I talk a lot about mental health, but my mental health does not define me. I am so much more than just my mental health. Like I said, your brain can tell you horrible things. It can make you feel like the worst person in the world, but you have to learn to be able to separate it. Don't look at it as it being fact because it's coming from you. It's not. It's something else in your head that's telling you that. It's not you. It might sound like you, and it might phrase it like you'd phrase it, but it's not you. It's not the real you. It's just a version of you that's basically fabricated in your own head. I'm not saying fabricated that it's not real. Of course it's real, but it's not the real you. It's not your truth. It's not who you are. Because obviously, like when that happened a couple of months ago, my brain was trying to destroy me. Mine was telling me that you're a horrible person, you're a really angry person, like you really hurt someone, emotionally hurt someone. By the way, I didn't. Anyway, like, how could you do that? And I was looking at myself in the mirror and I was like, I don't recognize this person at all. I thought I knew who I was as a person and kind of knew the way I reacted in situations. But a situation is a split-second thing, and hindsight is a great thing. You know, if I could go back, obviously I would 100% react differently. But I didn't. It was like, in any situation, it's fight or flight. That's just what happens. Now, of course, you can learn from it. But again, I happened to react badly. But again, that's not me. I was going through a lot with my mental health. I reacted badly. I did a bad thing. But I'm not a bad person. Your brain can tell you bad things, but that does not make that the truth. So you have to learn to forgive yourself or forgive your brain. Or I think a good way of even looking at it is trying to figure out who the voice is. Is the voice you? Is the voice someone else? Does it look like you? Like for me, I know that the version of me that tells me all the bad things, and I don't know why, but it's me, but like I've got like black hair, and the person is like soaking wet. It's what they look like. They're just like they went into the shower with all their clothes on. I've no idea why. I think obviously I have a very vivid imagination, but anytime I have bad thoughts coming into my head, that's what I picture. I picture this version of me with like dark clothes and dark hair and just like drowned wet, like whispering in my ear. Now, that could probably sound very scary or very strange, but the fact that I have like a name for him, the fact that I have an image of him, it makes that whole thing easier to forgive because I know who I'm forgiving. Now, again, that's just, it's just what I do. But if you can, it's all about giving yourself and your head the context that it needs to understand what you're doing and understand why you're doing it. So, for me, if I have this mental image of who I'm talking to, I know I'm talking to myself, but it's not exactly me. It's the slightly different version of me, but he's still a part of me. And it's him that I forgive all the time. Once you kind of have that, that context, that idea of who you're talking to and why you're talking to them, then that's when you start on the conversation. And unfortunately, this is probably the hardest part. You kind of have to have a good idea of your own self-worth. That's something else that you need to try and practice, because if you don't feel like you're worth anything, then you're not going to feel like you're worth forgiving. Because it's all about this constant battle that you have in your head, or that I have in my head. Like, I was in work yesterday, and just this thought kind of came into my head on something to do a video of, and sometimes it feels like I have joint custody of my brain. Like, I only have access to my brain, I only look after my brain part of the time. The rest of the time, it's someone else. It's the other me. But again, even knowing that, like I know that, I've accepted that, and I'm okay with that, because I understand what my mental health is and what it does and what it tries to do. It doesn't mean that it doesn't get me down. It doesn't mean that I lose sight of that, because I do, especially when I have the bad days. Like, my bad days are really bad, my good days are kind of good. And my good, or better way of putting it is, over the last while of me working on myself, my good days are a lot better and my bad days aren't as bad. And that's because I've learned, one, my self-worth, and two, self-forgiveness. And again, I promise you, none of this is easy. If it was easy, everyone would do it. But like, you have to take your time. Rome wasn't built in a day. You know, like, you have to really take your time, really focus on why you're forgiving yourself, and really getting to know yourself. Because like, I'm 24. I feel like I'm only now still kind of grasping who I am as a person. I know who I am in like relation to my friends and in relation to like my work colleagues and to my family and all that. But really, like, well and truly knowing myself, that's a difficult thing to do. Like, I have a friend for coming up on 20 years now, and I know him inside out, back to front. Like, I don't know myself that well. And I've known myself for 24 years. But like, it takes time, and it's difficult. But again, if you start doing it, and like, this goes for anything I've said in any of the podcasts. You could try, like, anything I've said. You could try it today. It might not work. Don't let that dishearten you. You try again next week, or you try again whenever you feel able, and eventually it starts getting a little bit easier. Or eventually, like, one small thing might stick. Then the next time you do it, that one thing will stick, and maybe something else will stick. It's about building it up. It's a process. It's not an instant fix. There is no instant fix. And also, along my own journey of kind of self-forgiveness and self-discovery and all that, I've realised how unique my brain actually is. And I've kind of learned to maybe view my depression and my anxiety and my whatever my mental health stuff is. I've learned to view it that maybe it's not such a bad thing at all. Like, again, I know personally I've made some really good pieces of work because of my mental health. I've come up with some great dialogues and some great kind of ways of explaining mental health because of the way my brain works. I think I've said it before, but like with the couple of counsellors I've had, many times we've gone over on our time because the counsellor is just listening to me talking about mental health and talking about mental health the way I do, with like the analogies that I come up with. And they're just fascinated by it, to the point where they're like, oh shit, we've gone 10 minutes over, there's someone waiting outside. You know, your mental health can give you a different perspective on things that maybe some other people don't see. The amount of times, both myself and through talking to other people with mental health stuff, that they've said, I wish I was normal. There's no one normal, for one thing, except fucking Paul Mescal, because he's apparently normal people. But anyway, no one's normal. There's no such thing as normal. Like, everyone is different. Not like normal is boring. It genuinely reminds me of that one line in the Incredibles where Syndrome, the villain, says, if everyone was super, no one would be. And when I was younger and I heard that line, I genuinely didn't understand it, because I was like, for sure, if everyone is super, then everyone is super. What do you mean? But through just getting older and realizing it makes a lot of sense. Like, if everyone was normal, if there was no such thing as mental health problems, the world would be very boring. We wouldn't have any unique perspectives on anything, because we'd all just have one linear way of thinking about things. And how fucking boring and awful would that be? Like, as much as there's reasons for people's mental health or for your anxiety, for anything like that, the best way to start on your journey of healing and of self-love and self-forgiveness and all of these things is starting with yourself. And it's the hardest person to start with, because sometimes you don't want to see your own flaws. You don't want to admit that you have a problem. Sometimes you can't even look at yourself in the mirror. And yet, I think a really, really good thing is learning some sort of positive affirmation, some sort of thing that you can say to yourself every day. And you don't have to tell people, and it doesn't have to rhyme, and it doesn't have to be catchy, and it doesn't have to be anything. It's just, it can be one sentence, it could be 40 sentences. It's just something that you can write on a sheet of paper and like put it in your wardrobe, put it in your bathroom, put it anywhere that just you will see it. And like, again, you write it down, something that you think will resonate with you, and you'll see it the first day, and you'll probably laugh at yourself, or you'll say, horse told me to do that, he's an awful fucking bollocks. And you see it the second day, you're brushing your teeth and you just look up and the sheet of paper is there and it says whatever, I'm strong, I'm good looking, I'm capable, I've got this, whatever it happens to be. And then day 3 and day 4 and day 5, and eventually it just sets in. It does. It's like those first couple of days you're going to laugh, you're going to think it's stupid, you're going to think that you're crazy, and you're just, but it does. I promise you it works. It genuinely does. It's the same as anything. I know that this episode in particular has probably been fairly chaotic, and it probably hasn't made a lot of sense, and it is a lot of me rambling, but like I've said before, I don't script these podcasts. I never want to script these podcasts. I want it to be just a stream of consciousness. I don't want it to be like I've scripted something that's going out to the masses. It's not. I want this to be for each individual person that listens. So it's just like we're having a conversation. So whether you're listening to this and you're going to work, listening to this and you're just out for a walk, listening to this and you're sat in your room, whoever you are, whatever you're doing, it's just a conversation between me and you. It doesn't matter how many other people listen. To be honest, I don't even know how many people do listen or don't listen. But I've said a lot. Just try and take one small thing. That's all you have to do. Take one small thing I've said. Whether it's the affirmations, whether it's the trying the self-forgiveness, any of that. Just take one thing and just go with it. Just try it. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. There's many different ways of trying things. But just try one. You know, like, what's the harm in trying at least one thing? So, like I said, I'm feeling a lot better now. Hopefully the podcast will be back to weekly. For the next week, lads, mind yourselves. And for God's sake, be kind to yourselves. Unless you're Paul Mescal, I hope you have a shit week. Oh, for God's sake.